Okay, let's begin. So thank you everyone for joining. The whole point of this session is just to give you an introduction to the study groups, just to let you know like what we want to achieve from the study groups, and we'll give you a quick introduction on how to write a good legal essay with a focus on constitutional law. So after the quick tutorial, we'll give you a past paper question that you can do in your groups, and then afterwards, once you've written a summary up for the essay question, we'll have a look at it and try and give you some feedback. But the academic side of the study groups is just one element of it. We want to really give you a chance to create a network of people in your year where you can talk to on like an academic and a social level. So I'll just hand you over to the PAL facilitators who are going to give you a tutorial of how to write a legal essay.
Hi guys, some of you might recognise us from some of the sessions that we've been running across this year. And as Jamie has said, we're going to just give you a wee rundown on what to include in an essay. I'm just going to share my screen here and hopefully this will work. And if anyone does have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, and one of us will get around to answering them. So obviously, we're looking at the focus on a common law essay and what to expect from that. So looking at the question itself is the best place to start. Make sure you understand exactly what the question is asking and read it over a few times if you're not 100% sure on that. When you're doing this, think about where you have heard about this topic before, whether that's a lecture, whether that's a tutorial, whether it's something you've read, and look at any words that the question may ask you to define. For example, with effective scrutiny, always wise to define exactly well what is meant by scrutiny and what would make it effective and why. This is basically to give you the setting out your argument at the start of the essay. This is a wee clip of what to expect when various, command words are used. I'll hand over to one of the other PAL facilitators to go through this.
Yeah, so when we're talking about like the question, it's really important to focus on exactly what it's asking you. So if it's asking you like to analyze something, like you're focusing on the how and the why of the issue or the topic, rather than like simply describing the thing or explaining how it works, you're really going in depth and analyzing why you do it like that, rather than just how you do it. And similar thing with comparing, you're really attacking the similarities and differences, and you've got to use contrasting vocabulary rather than just explaining two things next to each other. The big one probably that you'll be asked to do is evaluate. So that's things like how effective, or how effective mostly. If the question asks you how effective, you're evaluating something. So you've got to make a judgment call on like how good or bad something is doing, rather than just explaining it and highlighting the points. That's when they really want to know your opinion. And especially in constitutional law, they're going to ask you to evaluate things a lot. So just make sure when you're answering the question, you're reading the question, you're paying like super attention to what exactly it's asking you to do, rather than just the topic, or like, rather than just the topic. And so should we move into the next one? And yeah, I'll pass on to like someone. Grant or Eve, do you want to take this next one?
Yeah, okay, so I think normally when you've looked at your essay question and you've done the analyze, evaluate, you've looked at what you're looking at there, the best thing to then do is try and see the different sides of the argument that there are. And yeah, as it says on the PowerPoint, there normally are about 3, but I normally just like to subdivide mine into 2 sides of one argument, or alternatively, we'll take different points and then analyze at the end of my paragraphs. And I would say that's kind of the 2 main ways to focus at the sub-paragraphs of these essays. And I think it's also really important that you remember to put an introduction and a conclusion in as well, because that is what they like to see in these essays. It's a full essay. It's not just like a little bit, like, even though it is only about 700 words, they will expect a full essay, a full, like, well divided argument is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, is that everything there?
Okay, so when it comes down to actually writing the essay, obviously you've got your intro, your main body, and your conclusion. As you've kind of touched on, usually in your main body you've got maybe about three or four different like paragraphs or so, but obviously there's no right or wrong. You can have loads, you could have very few. It just depends all about your kind of analysis. So in terms of the intro, I'd always say don't make the intro too long, because you want most of your bulk to be in your main body, so you don't want to be taking up loads and loads of words with your intro. So kind of an intro, just give a kind of wee brief introduction about the topic, explain a wee bit about what the kind of concepts you're going to speak about, and just kind of give an outline of the argument and the points that you're trying to make in your essay. Very similar to what you've always been taught in school. When it comes to the main body, I'd always start off each paragraph with a kind of, I'd like to call it like a kind of topic sentence, basically what you're going to address in that, basically in that paragraph, and then go on to talk about the facts and how they relate, and analysis. And I think for me, one of the most important things is evidence. See if you get something really good that can support what you're trying to say. I think that's in a lot of essays where you pick up a lot of the marks. And also you can talk about rebuttals, arguments for and against, and your analysis. And then in the conclusion, just kind of give a summary of what you've kind of already said, basically kind of bring it all together, kind of overview of what, how your points are kind of related to your overall argument, and give a judgment based on what you've kind of already said. And yeah, just kind of remember your kind of IRAC method when you're going through the writing. I'd always say, just kind of helps it keep it structured. So obviously you've got your issue, you've got your rule, or basically your kind of point, your analysis, and then your conclusion. I think it's kind of main important things about when you're actually writing your essay. But hopefully when you're writing the essay, you've got a big plan, so it's not actually as hard as, or as daunting as when you first have to write it.
Yeah, I'm picking up on what Grant just said there. When you're writing your exam essays, especially because you've got 24 hours, it's such a good idea to just take like half an hour and just actually plan out what you're going to say, and then walk away from it for a bit before you actually start writing. And because you've got that time, it means you can actually write effective plans for your essays. And that will help you really structure your argument better and make sure you're hitting all these notes, rather than just like going for it and starting writing. The thing is, you've got these like quite strict word counts, which means you can't really just spraff. You've got to actually pay attention to what you're saying quite a bit. And by making a plan, that's how you're going to get the most effective essays written, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've got any questions about writing an essay, if you just put them in the chat or unmute yourself and we'll do our best to answer them. Otherwise, I will share that PowerPoint in the chat so that you guys can all access them in your study groups.
Yeah, so definitely take account of the fact that we are very limited with word count. So on the day, definitely make a plan. And also, like as you're going through your revision, have a look at the past paper questions and maybe just like write quick summaries of what you would actually talk about for that question in the exam. But yeah, also on the day, you do have quite a lot of time to make a plan, so don't just jump into your question. So I'm going to post in the chat function the past paper question that we're going to give you. So this is from last year's paper. You can all just have a look. So it's on constitutional conventions. Our plan for today isn't to give you, we're not going to give you feedback on what we would expect to put in your essay. Like the plan is for you to go into your study groups and to discuss this question, to write a quick summary of what you think would go in this essay. If you want to make a draft answer, that's absolutely okay. But we know that you're extremely busy at the moment. So if you want to like write quick bullet points for what you would put in this answer, then we'd be happy to have a look at it. So we have a couple of questions. I'll hand you back to the PAL facilitators just so they can answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to take the first one. So Jamie's asked, what are the implications of constitutional order and its like continuance reliance upon constitutional conventions and like how that might otherwise be done by legal rules? And we're probably not the best people to like ask that because it's been like a year.
Yeah, Alex, sorry, that's the question we're giving them for the past
sorry.
paper.
So sorry.
If you want to answer it, then we'll put you on the spot and you can.
What I was gonna say is it's really key when you're writing your constitutional law essays to tie everything back to conventions and like the like constitutional principles. Yeah. I can do the next one though. In the summative, we had to use sources, have a bibliography and stuff. Do we need references in the exam essay? Not really, like don't use footnotes. If you're mentioning a case, like put the case's name. And if you're mentioning a convention or something, constitutional's a bit weird in that like a lot of it's convention. Conventions don't have sources in the typical way. But like if there's legislation, cite the legislation. And if you're talking about case law, cite the cases, but you don't need a bibliography and you don't need to use footnotes. Just like kind of normal exam style referencing.
I think that is the standpoint of most tutors in most classes from what I've heard. So definitely agree. But yeah, like if you have any like questions in regards to this, I think your professors will have told you because this is like quite a crucial point. I think what they're trying to do with these online exams is they're trying to give a kind of realistic exam type situation. So like in an actual exam, you're not going to have time or the memory to be able to, to provide like a full source as you would in a summative essay. So in that regard, it is meant to be quite like realistic to an exam. But yeah, definitely take what Alex said on board and try and listen out to whatever your professor says with this. Someone want to answer the second question?
I'll take the next question. So Gavin asked, with analysis questions, what do you mean by the how and the why? What would this look like in context? I'd say in terms like the how and the why, you're kind of looking to speak about the effects of your point. And so I think if we look at the question we've got, so the implication of the constitutional, so basically the kind of how and the why would be, say basically the effect that the convention has on the constitution, and why that has that effect or how that has that effect is how I would tackle kind of analysis questions. Don't know if anyone's got a kind of clearer explanation than that, but that's kind of how I'd explain it. You're basically just looking to basically to back up and justify the point that you're making, and why that point basically is relevant, and how and why it relates back to your point, or to the question, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. And if we're applying it to like the question we've given you, I guess you'd kind of split it up into the different things it's actually asking you. So I guess the first thing it's asking you, what are the implications of for the constitutional order of its conventional reliance on like convention? So it's asking you, what does it mean? Like, what's the effect of the reliance on convention, and what would be like the comparison with legal rules? And then it's kind of asking you to evaluate, you know, where should the balance be struck? So if you're applying like with the analysis question, you can see where you've got to analyze, you can see where you've got to evaluate, and you can see where you've just got to explain.
So is there any more questions? There was one quick point I wanted to make, so maybe in the meantime you can think of more questions. So what I would say about constitutional is, like, from my experience, like 3 years ago, it seemed like when you look at the past papers, there are questions that come up quite a lot. I'm not saying like, oh, focus all your attention on them, but definitely like have a look at what came up in the past in order to get an idea of what could come up on the day. They're not trying to trick you. There are like core topics that are always covered in constitutional, so have a look out for them. Would you all agree? People that have done constitutional, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just quick following up on that, if you look at the problem questions, you will see a lot of them are very similar to ones you have covered in your tutorials so far. So look over your tutorial notes is definitely something I would recommend for the kind of problem question and how to apply in each kind of scenario. And look over the past papers for like the past 3 years or something like that, and you'll see that the style of questions are very repetitive, and you will need to answer both problem and essay questions in this exam. So just be wary of what topics are common in both.
Definitely. I think generally, like, the more time you spend in the law school, the more you realize that this is a common thing they do, and they're really not trying to trick you. They want you to do well. So yeah, always have a look at your tutorial notes and past paper questions. I don't think there are any more questions in the chat function. If anyone wants to ask questions privately, then of course you can contact any of us. We'll maybe stay behind for a few minutes at the end. So thank everyone for joining. Hopefully it's been beneficial for you. And going forward, I really hope you can take this conversation into the group chats with your study groups. Really, you guys need to take the initiative with this, and try and start a conversation. We will try and assist you through the process leading up to the exams, but also, if your study groups aren't going great, then just contact me and I'll try and maybe move things about, or try and, I don't know, help you start the conversation. But thank you everyone for joining. See you later.